Okay, so Popcorn Junkies are here to review Vice, which is the new Adam McKay film. Adam McKay, the director of this film, directed The Big Short, which was a film that was out a couple of years ago with Steve Carell, all about the stock market. But interestingly, did you know he also directed both the Anchorman films?
I didn't know that.
Which is why Will Ferrell and Brad Pitt are the exec producers of Vice.
Well, I noticed that Will Ferrell was one of the producers.
Yeah, Gary Sanchez Productions.
Well,
I think that's his production company.
Yeah.
I was a fan of The Big Short. Nadia hasn't seen it. You like The Big Short,
Yeah, I
didn't
do.
you?
I really want to see that.
I went into this film very excited by the trailer. I like Sam Rockwell. I like Christian Bale and I like Steve Carell. We've all seen Dick Cheney recently on What Is America or Who Is America. He was
with Sacha Baron
Cohen, where he got him to sign a waterboarding bottle. So this is the biographical portrait of Dick Cheney, who was obviously George W. Bush's vice president. So it was a biopic, but from the very first titles, it says something along the lines of, I can't remember what the exact words were, we're going to try telling the story, we're going to have a good fucking go at it.
Yeah, because he was notoriously secretive. He is notoriously secretive.
Ghost, as they say,
which I thought was clever, because in a way it was them saying this is a true story, but it ain't going to be true. But
is that enough of a disclaimer legally, I wonder?
Yeah, it is apparently.
I think Nadia's very sweet. Over the years, I've discovered that she's put a huge amount of trust in the idea that this is a true story, is genuinely a true. So you were horrified when the Fargo I revealed.
Well, I was going to say the Coen started off that whole business.
Yeah,
didn't
they're
they?
just because we say it doesn't mean it is. Of course, I forgot to mention Amy Adams is in there too, playing Dick Cheney's wife. I mean, you judge a film like you judge people when you meet them. You know in the first 6 nanoseconds as to whether you're going to like something. What did you think?
Just trying to remember what the very opening shot was. What was it?
Well, the opening was him driving along the road drunk. And he's getting his pulled.
Oh yes, his early life.
I was a bit disorientated at
I
the
was
beginning.
too. I thought it was
wasn't what I was expecting.
Yeah.
So I really didn't know how I was going. In those first 5 minutes, I really didn't know what I was going to get, and I was a bit worried.
Well, I would say exactly the same.
You were worried.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was.
Also,
I was panic-stricken.
Because it was his youth.
Yeah.
And it's impossible to keep away from all the publicity about a film, and everybody had gone on about how brilliant he was, Christian Bale. In the beginning scenes when he was young, I didn't think he was brilliant at all.
Right.
I thought he was like laboured, and I didn't believe in him at all.
Oh, right,
and so what was going through my head at that point was, I hope it gets better.
Then I was reminded, think back to Anchorman.
Yes.
I mean, a weird comparison.
Yes.
But there are a great many moments where really Anchorman is a biopic of Ron Burgundy.
Yes.
And so he uses all the devices of telling a biographical story.
Yes.
This is when Ron decided he wasn't... And they'd freeze the frame and there'd be someone in shot. Well, this happens a lot. All the same stylistic devices and tricks.
And more.
And more are at work in this. And then I got even more concerned.
Yeah.
Because then we had certain sort of, we saw him sort of a drunken, lying in his own sick. Amy Adams, I thought that first scene between Amy Adams and him was very weak, where she was telling him off. I was like, oh my God, this is...
That made me go further down.
Yeah, I went further down. I was almost about to beat a hasty retreat out of the cinema.
I don't necessarily agree.
No?
Maybe that's just because I'm a mad fan of Amy Adams. I thought there was incredible truth in it. When she's telling him off and you've got the flashbacks of the father and her reality and icon. And I thought it was a good moment about women in those times and everything. You know, she was smart, she was ambitious. I just got really settled with who her character was. But Amy just showed us so much, I felt, of where we were going to go. So I was excited about that, around the weakness.
Oh, right. I had less concern probably around the whole Amy part of it. What I found unbelievable and sort of a bit disorientating, and then it still made no sense when we were then him getting the internship, was if he was such a drunk and such a C- he was getting in his grades, and lying in his own pools of vomit, and had nothing to say back to this strident woman who was telling him he was a no hope.
Except that he promised her he wouldn't.
Finally promised her that he wouldn't. That's all well and good. But at this point, we've seen him in a pile of sick, crash a car, C-, not particularly motivated. How the hell did he find himself in a room with Donald Rumsfeld saying you're all in here?
Yeah, but we were just talking...
George, you could say that.
No, but I thought it was a weak. It was a real weakness.
We were just talking about that scene though, that scene before the turning point. It was pivotal, wasn't it? And then I agree. Suddenly, he's got an internship
at the White
House.
In this problem, I think, was one of the major problems with the film.
Okay.
And I think one of the major problems overall with the film, without blowing what we think of the entire film, was that it feels like his life and his career is so rich and so full. They had to make some very, very definite abridges. They had to abridge his story in certain ways.
You know what I always think they needed to do, because we all laughed, the audience loved that first time, we're going to give it a good fucking go.
Yeah.
It almost like, because there was some adventurous things, the techniques that the director used in it, it was almost like, this is a whole bit we know fuck all about. We kind of almost wanted that, and I think that he thought he'd done that with that one sentence at the front, because there were gaps.
I just
There wasn't enough time.
so my take on the film, and it's weird that we're doing a review of it almost chronologically, was the first 20 minutes I was very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I was at sea. I was finding there were bits I liked, and there were bits that I thought, well, that didn't make sense. And I thought, well, that's a bit clumsy. And did it happen like that? How was he? Then the moment for me, and I don't know if it was the same for you, the moment for me when it changed tonally and they'd had me hooked was as he sat down in his first office, struggled on his chair, nearly fell off his chair, picked up the phone, and you got well, Dick Cheney had arrived in the White House. And from there, I felt the film knew what it was trying to do.
Yeah, but that was a superb bit
That was
of acting.
such a brilliant scene.
But that was all acting, wasn't it? Because it was like he was too small for the room.
Too small for the
He
room.
didn't know what the hell to do.
No.
He had nothing.
It was a hideous room.
It was a hideous
Anyone
room.
that's a drama student, you have to watch this film
That was
just for that
fantastic,
scene
yeah.
to know about true inhabiting a character.
I thought the film then shifted a gear, and I thought at the point that it was in, it still moved at a cracking speed through Nixon, Ford,
Yes.
And it was
Reagan.
great watching Amy Adams'
Transformation.
progression through as she
Yeah.
was, because she really was
Mm.
a big part. She was like in those days. Behind every great man, there's a great woman.
Yeah.
She was
Unfortunately, she was a powerhouse, and I loved how ambitious she was. Quite underplayed. She didn't have a lot of script.
It wasn't overt.
No.
It wasn't overt
No.
ambition either.
Wasn't she the first one to say that the vice president it was her that said, wasn't
Well,
it?
you're
It was
right.
just
There's no job.
She sows the
Speech.
seeds of saying there's
Yeah.
absolutely no
Nothing.
nothing of any qualitative worth to this
Because I
post
think up until
whatsoever.
that point, she was so politically ambitious. She would have liked to be first lady until it was obvious that maybe his first heart attack or whatever.
And she was a very fiery Republican. I mean,
Yes.
her outrage
Very
that
knowledgeable.
Nixon had been treated the way that he was,
Yeah.
regardless of what he'd actually done.
Exactly.
I was very impressed with its handling of history.
Oh, God.
From that
Yeah.
point on, I
I
thought
thought it
the
was
great
amazing.
sweep of
it
all
was a
these
brilliant
presidencies. I mean, it was a great
the editing
lesson.
and the bringing in real scenes and I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah.
What did we think of Steve Carell?
Stupendous.
Yeah.
I thought
Loved
he was
every
remarkable.
second.
Yeah.
I thought he was really remarkable for saying.
Faultless for me.
Doesn't he seem like a shark? It's
He
his
seems
teeth,
like a
and
shark.
when he smiles, like, I'll be afraid, be very
Yeah.
afraid.
Well, I
seems
thought
scary.
he was his malevolence when he was
Yes.
saying nothing was
Yeah.
so
He was
powerful.
delicious.
He
Every
was
second
delicious.
he was on
It's a
the
good word.
screen,
He
it was
was
delicious.
He really was, and that's quite saying something, because when you think of his caricatured weatherman persona in the Anchorman films, handled by the same director, there were moments where his laugh really recalled his character from that film, and yet at the same time he was so in possession of this kind of manoeuvring. And yet, at the same time, when he played the outside of things, when he had to be sent off to be a sort of representative, because
an ambassador,
and then when Cheney calls him in and says we've got to be unassociated with the Nixon thing, and you can see his opportunity, I just thought he played it brilliantly. I thought he was absolutely brilliant.
Well, and it's an obvious bit, but the scene where he says, and this tells you everything about Dick Cheney too, was what do we believe in?
Oh, I know.
And the
Yeah,
shit.
what do we?
I mean,
yeah.
that was what the film was about, basically.
Which was brilliant.
It
which
was,
brilliant.
and then just laughter.
Yeah.
It's so clever not to have written dialogue.
Yeah.
Now, there's a really hard, there's a reveal in this story and a spoiler that we could throw at you, which they sow the seed of it very early on in the film. And it revolves around Jesse Plemons' character, who you're forever kind of wondering, what the hell is this guy talking about?
And he says,
We're not going to do this.
And we're not going to do the spoiler on that, but he's the
spoiler.
narrator. So you have this question mark hanging over the entire film, which for me, when it's revealed what the actual thing is, was one of the most remarkably shocking moments I think I can remember in cinema recently.
I loved it. I screamed. It was
just so...
Without
But
being...
didn't you love the way?
Did you guess that?
No.
I did.
Oh, I see.
Just before it happened. Just before.
no.
Oh,
it was
right. No,
revealed.
I didn't.
I really loved how we were made to sit and think again about the horror of Iraq and manipulation, and it was just gobsmacking. And also the cutting in of all those awful torture pictures that we all saw, the men are treated like dogs, the Iraqi prisoners.
Oh, God, yeah.
And
Do you remember
also,
that? Yeah.
but also the insight into Cheney, and he made some appalling, I think, decisions, you know, the waterboarding he allowed, and he's been very proud of the fact that he allowed the, you know, arrest of people, the, what is it called, the beautiful rendition, what's that awful saying?
Extraordinary rendition.
Extraordinary rendition. You can take somebody from one country, put them in a van and torture them, and all of that stuff was good for us to remember the horrors of that.
Yeah.
But I think the film did a really good job of showing us the man and where those decisions had come from. His children, sidebar story about his daughter being gay and him being so protective of that was very interesting. His wife, who he adored, and the fact that there was that one scene when he's getting a report from all the different agencies about what all the chatter has been on the dark web.
Yes.
You know, cutting off heads, there's going to be 1,000 beheadings, there's going to be this, and you just see him taking all this stuff in. And that is what informed his decisions.
Yeah.
Because he was actually protecting his own family. He got this, I suppose, paranoia that, you know, this whole war on terror nonsense, that it was coming from every single
Did you think that? Did you think that, or did you not think he was just carving up Iraq for the oil barons that he wanted to get into?
I think it was a mixture of both. I think we saw the man. Obviously, we always saw the politician, but
I think what they successfully showed you in that scene was his decision. You saw they gave you the thought process. They gave you the consciousness that he would have had to justify the decision making in his head. Whilst behind the scenes, he was actually carving up Iraq.
But I do think he was worried about his family as well. His family did come above anything else. I mean, look, when he first refuses the position.
Well, George W. Bush, when he first is presented to Sam Rockwell's who I thought was brilliant. I thought Sam Rockwell was very. Did you not like it?
I did, and I always do, but I didn't think.
He was a bit of a caricature.
Yeah.
He was a bit of a caricature.
But think of what Bush was like.
But George W. Bush was a caricature.
It wasn't on screen enough for it to...
Imagine in 10 years' time someone playing Trump, everyone's going to go, what?
That's
such a character to
point.
Nobody could be like that. And the Americans are often so like the movies that we can't believe they're real.
As well as that, I just loved the way they played the Twin Towers. Because that scene where suddenly everybody's going... planes in the air? How many planes have we got in the air?
Yeah, it was brilliant.
And I
thought it's representation of the chaos, because you assume that there was just organised response.
Yes.
At the top of the government. I got goosebumps. I thought it was incredibly compelling how he dealt with that directorially. Churchillian.
He was almost Churchillian, wasn't he?
Well, but it was that time.
In the air, you've got to do this. I mean, it was just.
But you forget that the sense within government was probably that they were under attack. So it was even the way in which I thought he played it brilliantly, Christian Bale. The way he was in the White House, but he was being ushered around like this.
He was the president.
He is essentially the president.
He was the president. He told George Bush to stay in the sky. Is that right? Was he flying in? I didn't remember that. And he was going to make all the decisions.
Did you not read that as
Condoleezza Rice? How much did the actress look like Condoleezza Rice?
I wondered if what they were inferring there about him keeping George W. Bush in the sky was perhaps he'll be shot down.
There's a point in the film where we don't know why he got to where he got to, because all they've given us is that he seems a bit of a dummy. Actually.
But there's that really good quote from Anonymous that says, "Be mindful of the quiet man."
And then suddenly, from that moment onwards, the Twin Towers thing, you could see him thinking 50 million steps ahead of everybody else, and just giving out the information slowly, and then it became the war on terror, and that was chilling too, because you suddenly realised they were going to sacrifice Iraq. Just like that. Everybody knew it wasn't Iraq.
Yeah, and I thought it was a very compelling portrait and an important portrait of the absolutely... because, of course, let's not forget, there are still people who believe the connection is right. Blair still trots around the world the idea that this was the case. But I thought it did a really good job of showing how paper-thin the evidence was.
Yes.
And obviously this is an opinion, this isn't stating fact, but you can see the degree to which... a totally artificial construct was created for the world to be sold to the world. And they kept doing those polls of the American public. The public aren't convinced there's a connection.
No.
And there's
working out what the words were that they had to use.
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
I loved all this stuff with Colin Powell.
Oh God,
well, Colin Powell.
I
felt for him, especially when they said, he felt ghastly about making the speech.
Day in his life.
And also they sent him in there like a sacrificial lamb
because everybody believed him.
Yeah.
But again, there was a little gap there, because what took him from sitting there going, "There's no way I'm going to do this,"
to doing it.
A man of conscience.
Yeah.
I think in a weird way the film was a victim of its incredible incredibly ambitious sweep.
Yeah.
It was sweeping across so much. I mean, you almost could argue that there should be 2 films, or they should have started later, or avoided the Nixon stuff and just concentrated on the Iraq thing, because it felt so rich. And I think if I have any criticism of the film, it's that I could have spent a bit more time with the detail of some of the decision making. I thought as the film went on, Christian Bale got stronger and stronger and stronger.
Too. Yeah.
I mean, I just thought he became. I
became obsessed with him.
Yes.
It's almost like after I left the cinema, the physicality of him, and not just because he put on a lot of weight, and he did, but just the loomingness of him. And whether that was because they filmed it like that, you would know this, but he seemed to be looming over everything.
Well, they did take slightly low camera angles. What about the incredibly arresting moment where they broke into Shakespearean speech?
I know, there's been a lot of fuss
that
about that. Amy Adams loved doing it.
I love those, she'd be great.
What was the trigger to go into it? They said something like,
it's
almost Shakespearean.
We almost need a Shakespearean scene, but life's not like that. And then I love at the end of it when he goes,
Yes.
The Shakespeare scene was one of many, many inventive things. I mean, they have, for example, at one point in the film, they have a fake ending with a fake credit roll. And they have all sorts of kind of moments where they'll stop scenes and recreate scenes and adjust
little
scenes.
surprises.
Yeah, little surprises all the way through.
Things like on the voiceover, like if things had stayed like this would have happened.
Yeah.
And that would have been.
Yeah, and they were I like the way they sort of give you choices. But again, it's really odd. If you go back to Anchorman, all the same devices are used in Anchorman. It's an incredibly similarly structured film.
It is.
Incredibly similar. So for me, moments like that, they were, what I would say as we arrived somewhere, there was so much inventiveness in this film.
Inventive.
I mean, it was almost a victim of how inventive it was on so many spectacular levels.
A bit like the Coen brothers in moments.
Yes.
They suddenly surprise you by doing something thoroughly odd.
One big thing before we do go into something that really surprised me about Cheney the man was his, without giving away what happens in the end, but it was his defence of his lesbian daughter. Did you read that as what it was, or was there something? I kept waiting for the kind of but.
I think he loved his family more than anything.
I was waiting for the but there wasn't a but.
There wasn't a but.
That was surprising and very well done, I thought.
And yet, right at the end.
Well, I'm right at the end. We won't give it. But you know, some people have described this film as cleverly biting, and others have described it as a clumsy display of political hatred. But I thought it did quite a good job of parking of political hatred. Yeah, and that's probably coming from the ultra right saying that. But I thought it did a good job of personalising him. I think you're right. You know, the sense of he had his physical vulnerability with his heart. A remarkable resolution to the heart situation. There is a heart shot that is remarkable. Okay, well, let's summarise. Mum, why don't you lead? What was your summary and score for this?
I started off the same as you two guys, as we've all said, that I was a bit worried because I thought this isn't happening like I expected it to happen. Love The Big Short. There was something about its light-heartedness and sort of satiricalness that, although I didn't know that Will Ferrell was producer until the end, and I didn't know about him being part of the writing team for Anchorman, but there was something of that nature about the whole sort of way it was written that made me think, the essence. I love the history, I love the way it weaved history, true history, true history in terms of the Twin Towers, we don't know about the Middle East, and everything else into the lives of these people. Amy Adams was astonishing. I mean, as you say, the power behind the man. And Christian Bale just grew in stature, I mean, literally, all the way through it, till I went home after the film. I couldn't get his looming presence out of my mind.
No,
it was like
incredibly captivating,
everywhere.
wasn't it?
Oh God, that's a difficult one. My score is...
It is difficult to score this.
8 out of 10. 8 out of 10.
Yeah, I found the first 20 minutes really uncomfortable. I was kind of, I felt like I was in a plane in extreme turbulence, and I was kind of like, okay, are we going to finally kind of, find some equilibrium here at some point? I thought it was an incredibly creative and inventive film, narratively. I mean, stylistically, it was okay, but I mean, I thought narratively, it really made me rethink about storytelling, and I think that's a real achievement, really.
Oh, God,
it made me think about how you can run one way, you can run another, you can just shift. If you do something with enough bravura and confidence, you can suddenly cut into Shakespeare, and I've got to sort of just give my thumbs up to a film that just cuts to Shakespeare. Self-written Shakespearean verse. Good on you. I thought he was phenomenal. I thought Steve Carell was absolutely brilliant. And there was one quote that Steve Carell made where he said, "Can you believe that in these really ordinary, boring offices, and they cross-cut with the bombing of civilians in the Middle East. I thought that was incredibly chilling, and I thought it was very powerful in its contrasting cutting of these bureaucratic idiots, self-interested, fat, opulent Republican men, and then the reality on the ground. I thought it didn't ignore that, it didn't shy away from it, and I thought it was very good. So I thought it was a very political, it is a polemical film, it is clearly on the liberal left, it is satirising Dick Cheney, but at the same time I thought it compellingly made me care about him as well. So I was interested
amazingly,
in it. And Christian Bale is phenomenal in it. So I would give it, and I thought Jesse Plemons was good, I'd give it a 7.5 out of 10.
Okay.
For me, it was a real surprise. It was funny because even though that beginning was really sticky for me, as we left the cinema, I said I loved every minute of it because it kind of like, it made up for it through the rest of the film. So I don't want anyone to be put off by that first, because it's not terrible. It's just not very good. And it's just a bit disorientating. And you want I think the first 20 minutes of a film, you want your audience to be sitting there confident that they're in good hands, that you know that the director has got a good handle on it, and you're going to be told a story. I hadn't thought of it until you just said it. It's really creative way to tell a story. It broke some barriers on. You know, some of the things we've complained about on this review are almost what makes it a kind of a special film as well. I thought every performance was absolutely stellar. I mean, I can't think of a performance or a line or anything that I could fault. So it was just a great film about power, about women's position in that time. It was a good history lesson. It was a salutary reminder of the devils that can be in politics and the lies that we can be sold, and the loss of innocent lives. So no, it was a really, really good film, good film. So, and the popcorn was good. I think I will give it a 7.5 as well, just because of that weak beginning. If that beginning had been better, it would have been an 8, I think.
Oh, well, I thought, and also just a final thought, I thought his final address to camera was incredibly powerful.
I'd like to see the real Dick Cheney one of that.
Yeah, but I mean, I think the way he turned into camera, I thought it was so compelling, and it was so powerful, so powerful. And finally, he has been nominated for an Academy Award for Best Actor, and he won the Golden Globe, so I think he's probably going to win. I think he probably is going to win. I don't think Bradley. Over Bradley.
For more film and family fun, don't forget to click the subscribe button and make sure to click the bell to never miss an update.